How's it going, everybody? I'm Ethan Estes. We're at the MWAA conference. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rod Katzfey, president of the MWAA, Midwestern Acquirers Association. Rod, how are you doing? Thank you for
Doing
joining me.
great, Ethan. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm enjoying the conference. It's kind of my first time being in one of these scenarios. I went to the NACHA PIA conference, and this is kind of my first big time show. So I'm
Well,
excited to be here.
welcome to the Midwest. We're excited to have you in your company, and hopefully you're learning something. And
Absolutely.
we think we have a great conference, and we always welcome new faces every year.
Yeah, well, I'm enjoying it. I'm doing a lot of learning, trying to be a fly on the wall and just absorb the information. Could you give the viewers a little bit of information on who you are? What is it you
Sure,
do?
absolutely. So my name is Rod Katzfey. As Ethan said, I've been in the banking and payment space for 31 years, or over 31 years. I started in banking while I was in college as a teller. I did new accounts, commercial lending. Then I got into merchant by accident, knocking on doors, and have worked with a lot of the large providers. And then also do private work with private folks. And then I also currently have my own consulting company as well. So I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. But most people that have been in this industry enjoy passing that information on to folks like yourself.
Absolutely. So within your career, you had many leadership positions. What kind of skills did it take, and what did you have to employ to
Yeah,
be successful?
that's a great question. I think leadership in some cases is learned. And what I mean by that is you see it from other people.
Mm.
So I fortunately have had some great mentors within my career. One, starting with my grandfather, and then other people that in the space. And it all comes down to people. How do you treat people? If you treat them well, they will treat you well. And I've always taken the same thought process of I never ask anybody to do something I haven't personally done or would not be willing to do. And I think a great leader recognizes talent in many different ways. And you always want to surround yourself or have people in your organization that have different talents and different expertise than you necessarily do. It goes back to what they call a strong manager, weak manager theory. A weak manager surrounds themselves with people who are just like they are, will never challenge them. Yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am type of people. Whereas a strong manager surrounds themselves with people who have expertise in other areas than they do. And that manager, that leader doesn't feel threatened by people that may know things differently than they do or have a different expertise.
It's a collaborative effort.
So it's exactly. So you can actually grow your organization. You can grow the team by expanding the roles to people and trusting in them. But to circle that all the way back to the part of your question, it's people. It's how you treat people.
What goes around comes around, essentially.
Absolutely.
So going back to the abilities and talents and stuff like that, what would you say are some of your strengths that have really helped you succeed in the industry?
I would say, probably one of my strengths has always been process. Being able to identify a process that's efficient. And the only way you get to that is by experiencing things. So as you know, different people learn in different ways. Some people, they can read a book and they can transfer that very, very simply. I think for me, I've always been the type that just likes to roll up my sleeves, get involved and get in things, so that I can learn that. And then, like I said, you look for efficiencies and stuff like that. So, and I think time management is probably, process flow, and then also time management, being able to balance your time. You can take on many things, but you also have to understand that other people are also reliant on you. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to, it will negatively affect how they're doing things and what they're waiting for as well.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm with you on the kinesthetic learning, the needing to actually be able to do it to learn.
Right.
I can't just read something or hear it. I need to
Sure.
get into it. Going back to your experience being in the industry so long, how has it grown? How have you seen it evolve? What has the changes been?
That's a great question because I'll just say this. If you go to McDonald's today, we're in the payments industry, you probably pay with a credit card. When I started in this industry back in 1996, McDonald's didn't take credit cards. So I've watched the evolution. We go back to simple terminals that we would now consider dumb terminals. A Trans 330, a Trans 380, a Hypercom, T7P. These are all terminals, and that was the way of accepting credit cards. Online payments wasn't a thing. Mobile payments wasn't a thing. E-commerce, all of that kind of stuff hadn't even started. So a lot of what I was doing early on was knocking on doors, going to businesses that had never accepted cards before. Dry cleaners, nail salons, restaurants. I mean, can you imagine going into a restaurant that didn't take credit cards?
That'd be difficult.
That's what I used to go to. And then obviously while you had those non-acceptors, I would also go into businesses that were accepting that maybe had older equipment, or their rates were out of date, or maybe they were looking for add-on things like that. So, that was where it is. Now, if you fast forward to where we are today, back in the day, you had to go to businesses and convince them to take credit cards. Now, today, most businesses don't open without credit cards. So that's what's made Stripe and Square and some of those other smaller, well, I shouldn't say smaller companies, but that go towards smaller merchants to get them started, because it's just natural now. I open a business, I need payments. That's not the way it was. So that's probably the biggest significance, is that businesses now are looking for places to put their payments acceptance, as opposed to us having to convince them.
So you say it's easier to sell the material now?
I don't know that it's easier to sell. I think it's obviously more competitive. I would just tell you that you're not taking the time now to convince them that they need to accept cards, right?
More so your business instead of someone else's.
Yes, absolutely. So now you're trying to convince them to go with your company versus a different company. Whereas back in the day, back in the 1900s, as I like to tell my kids, you had to convince people that acceptance of payments was what consumers were wanting. I'll give you an example: a dry cleaner. I go into a dry cleaners. I used to live here outside of Chicago in Naperville, and I took my bundle of dry cleaning shirts to a cleaners one day, and the guy tells me, and I pull out a card, and he goes, "Oh, we don't accept cards." I'm like, "Oh, you don't?" He goes, "But no, the one across the street does." So not only is he not accepting cards, but he's telling me where to take my business. So I packed up my stuff, and he goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going across the street where you told me." Well, 30 days later, I left my card just in case. 30 days later, a guy calls me back. I guess the reason he called me back was he was losing so much business because he wasn't accepting credit cards.
That makes sense.
So people may, in some cases, may do business with you that one time, right? If you didn't take all the cards, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover. A lot of people don't take Amex because they think the price is too high. Well, there are certain card holders that's all they're going to use. They may do business with you this one time, but they're going to go somewhere else the next time. So who are all these these consumers that you're losing that you don't even know, right? So that I always use that as a story of to tell people of acceptance. This guy wasn't quite there. He's sending his customers somewhere else. He's losing business. And eventually he came around and realized, hey, I'm losing customers. I probably need to accept.
You definitely need the wake-up call.
Now, today, you don't have that problem, right? Because pretty much everybody accepts cards. Now we're having people that maybe they do surcharge, maybe they do, cash discount. So now we're going through a whole nother phase of that. But yeah, back when I was going, it was more about convincing people to accept cards. Now it's more about what technology do you have? What makes you different than the other person? If that makes sense.
Of course, yeah. So going from selling credit cards and trying to convince companies to get to invest in accepting that method, and seeing where it's at now, where do you think payments is going to continue to evolve? What do you think is the next big thing?
Mobile is. I mean, I was a late adopter of mobile as well. Again, coming from a banking background, understanding fraud and risk and things like that. I was a late adopter to that. I was a late adopter to bill pay. I just wasn't comfortable. And I think now, not using me as the litmus test of, oh, well, I'm comfortable, everybody else is. I just think that more and more people are getting comfortable with the concept. I'll tell you, COVID, it's a nasty word that, we try not to bring up, but it actually, I think, accelerated the acceptance of mobile payments, of online, of omni-channel. Because again, you couldn't go to stores. businesses had to figure out a way that they could still do business with consumers. Consumers had to figure out a way that they could still get the things they could without having to go into a retail location, going through up and down a cart, in a grocery store, or food. They want to do that. As I mentioned earlier, doing consulting, I was contacted during COVID by a lot of software developers, POS folks, and they said, Rod, what should we be looking at right now? I mean, they're late, but they're like, what do we need to focus on? And I said, omnichannel. Consumers still want a face-to-face experience in some cases, but they also now are comfortable wanting to look at your catalog, look at your inventory, whatever your merchandise is online. In some cases, they may want to buy online, but they don't want it delivered. They don't want it shipped. They still want to stop by the store and pick it up.
Absolutely.
So now, if you don't have that omni-channel experience, they're going to go somewhere else that does. So now, again, it goes back to, if you don't have certain, we talked about acceptance earlier, but now if you don't have a way for that consumer to shop, it's not even about payments. It's about how do they shop, right? Then you're going to lose them to that. So to answer your question full circle, I think we'll see continued growth in mobile. I think with a lot of stores, now everything is smart. We talked about dumb terminals, but now everything is smart. Their tablets, their inventory management, their back office, they have all of that. Like I said, omnichannel, I think, is one it's advancing quickly, but I think it's also one that more and more companies need to make sure that it's balancing out.
I see. Yeah, I agree with you completely. COVID was definitely a catalyst in contactless payments being more successful. I think everybody's using their phone now, and they didn't want to catch it. So,
right.
Yeah, 100%
You're right.
agree with you.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the conference with MWAA, you started as an advisory board member, and you've had this long journey of now you're the president. What is the change in responsibility been like? What does it take to run something like this conference?
Yeah, it's I think back about it every single year. I went to the first show. Somebody had contacted me and said, "Hey, we're starting this Midwest conference. You should come to the show." So I went to the show. I knew some of the folks that were on the board at the time, and shortly after the show, they called me and says, "Hey, we're starting an advisory board. Would you like to be a part of it?" And I said, "Absolutely." Because I looked at it then, just as I do now, as a way of giving back. So I was on advisory board for several years. Then I moved onto the main board. Each year, each conference, we try to make it bigger and bigger and more informational for folks that, to keep coming back. And, eventually that led to being the president the first time I did that. And then I was asked again to kind of rotate back through to where I could do it again. And that was after COVID. We had some challenging times. We didn't have our show in 20, then bringing it back in 21, downtown Chicago. Midwest was actually the first conference for the Marriott downtown, Marriott Magnificent Mile, to bring that back. And we were able to bring back 300 employees as part of that.
Oh, wow.
So, for me, that meant a lot. But it also showed not only did we have a constituent base of exhibitors and sponsors and attendees, but we were now also giving back to the community in a way that we never could have thought. Because, it takes a lot to put one of these on.
Of course.
But there's also a whole other, when we use hotels, we use, you use the staff, that keeps the rooms clean, that puts the food, in the exhibit hall, that does all of the different things. So, you never really think about it until we kind of face that situation. So now, I'm in my I guess third term of it. And, I think the biggest learnings are just, again, being there, moving into each one of those positions, learning more, being able to grasp more. But for me, it's I'm at a point within the organization that I'm also trying to make sure that we have a future, that we put the right people in place, that we have the right bench strength. So we're constantly looking for that next generation that can come in and help continue to grow the Midwest. This is our 21st year. We just changed our logo. I'm sure you saw it. So for us, that was something new. I hope we picked a logo that people will resonate with, and that it'll be around for another 20 years. Now, I won't be at Midwest for another 20 years. Some people may think so, but I won't. I won't be. But I want the next group of folks, your generation,
Mm.
if you will, because payments will continue to grow. But we also need people who think differently than we do and come up with different ideas and stuff.
So, with this young generation moving forward, how do you think we can leverage this new creativity and innovation to further payments, like you said?
So there's this love hate
Okay.
between the next generation and we'll call it the older generation. And I think the love hate is a lot of times we forget that we were that next generation at one point, right? So I think back to my parents, I think back to my grandparents, I think back to other people, and it actually just hit me the other day when somebody said that to me. They said, sometimes people are talking always about being frustrated with that next generation. They're lazy, they're this or that. And I really started resonating, and I'm thinking, you know what? That's how they felt about us.
Mm,
And I think part of that honestly comes from we always want more for the next generation than we had. And
absolutely.
to me, that should be a natural progression in anything. My parents wanted more for me than they had. Their parents wanted more for them. So I think sometimes the negative that is given to your generation, it's not really a negative. It's just we want more. We expect more from you guys than we have.
I see.
But I think what is that next generation looks for? Again, I've always been the type that looks up to people as mentorships and actions. And I think for your generation, if they are willing to reach out, kind of like you have today, right? You reach out and you said, "Hey, Rod, can we have a conversation? I'd love to learn more." If you obviously know that, but others will do that.
Mm,
We have great stories that we'll share, right? We want to share those stories because we don't want you to go through the same pain points that we did. But our natural instincts, I've always told people, is I will tell you exactly what's going to happen verbatim, but you still are going to go do it your way, and then you're going to experience it, and then you're going to find that maybe I was right, and then you'll be like, well, maybe they were right, but you have to experience it yourself.
absolutely.
And I think that's part of the frustration sometimes. I obviously I have two daughters. You work with one,
Yeah.
but part of my frustration is I've told them everything,
Mm,
but natural instinct is they have to experience it, right? So maybe I get frustrated that I told you, but you had to go experience it. But I also understand it because I was the same way, and I think the next generation will be the same way, and it'll just go on.
seems like stubbornness is a common factor within
I
the new
think
generations.
stubbornness. Is probably a good word for it. But I guess it's also you're being your own person.
Mm,
You're blazing your own
I
path,
see.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's better than the alternative of not. And I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship. I'm a big believer in supporting people. I actually go back and speak at my high school and in my college. I also support young entrepreneurs that are out there because I want to give back. I want to teach because I had some of those folks do that for me. So it's important for me to do that. And obviously this was your first Midwest that you were at. You probably heard my opening remarks yesterday.
Hmm.
But over the years, I always say the same thing about the next generation. Are we preparing the next generation? Are we giving them the tools? Are we giving them the opportunities for us to continue to take this not only in payments, but in life?
Mm. Well, looking back for your entire history of volunteering with MWAA, or like you said, going back to your high school and stuff like that, is there any memories that stick out that might be like of your fondest memories of the whole career?
There's probably a couple, and I just hit on one of them. When I was talking about downtown and the fact that we were able to bring back 300 plus people back to their jobs
Absolutely.
that they had lost to no fault of their own,
Mm.
right? That is a very fun, especially with Midwest, to know that we had that such an impact at a certain time of the year, being the first and being able to do that. I'm sure there would have been someone else if it wasn't us, but it was us. and it was our timing and things. So that one sets out pretty far up there for me now, just knowing what that has been. But you know what? There are so many different people that have done so many different things for me and given me opportunity during my career. But I will tell you, it all goes, for me personally, it all goes back to my grandfather. My grandfather was a believer in people, and he put that in you. And then when I was in high school, I had great teachers that were there to support us and things like that. And I was even back in Missouri, where I'm originally from, a couple of weeks ago, and had lunch with my business teacher. Her name is Mrs. Lovewell. I still will call her Mrs. Lovewell to this day. And she's like, no, it's Sheila. I'm like, no, it's Miss Lovewell. But she was a huge impact, and it was great to see her, great to talk to her. She follows my story. She follows where I've been, and that's encouraging. I mean, I'm 50 years old, and here's somebody who still cares about success and wants to see the best for you and stuff. And I think when you have those kind of people early in your career, early in your development, and as a student, I think that's important. So when you ask to do something like this, I absolutely agree to do that, because other people have done it before.
I really do appreciate the time.
So absolutely.
You've mentioned quite often that good mentorship is really important to success.
Yeah.
So for this young generation and upcoming professionals, how would you recommend them find good mentorship? Because it can be really difficult to get led astray by certain people. How would you know that it's a good mentor?
I hate to say it, but you just know. Okay. And what I would say is how you pursue it is, obviously we use LinkedIn a lot. Absolutely. Right? So, if there's a certain path you want to go down, there's a certain industry you want, or, certain companies, you can use LinkedIn very easily as a directory, right? For those types of things. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman in Atlanta a few years ago. He called me up and he's, had met me at the Midwest show, and we had talked at just different times. And he called and he said, this may sound strange. He goes, but would you mentor me? Well, if he would have never reached out, then I couldn't have never given him guidance of course I said yes. And we met a few times for lunch. He'll call, we'll do that. It's a sounding board, right? So it's, how did I find my mentors? I think they just kind of fell in my life, or they were people that I was interacting with, and I just felt comfortable in a sense that I felt like I could ask them questions, I could do things, and like I said, you don't have to have mentor in big quotes, air quotes, or billboard that says you're my mentor. You probably have mentors that you don't even know that are mentors. These are just people that you trust. These are people who you talk to.
Positive impact.
These are exactly. So different people use different words. Like a friend to me is an acquaintance or something. For your generation, a friend, it's like you have to be really, really close to you. Yeah. I have my other daughter who we have that difference of understanding sometimes what's a friend or what's not a friend. So I'm trying to catch up on some of that. But like I said, a mentor could be somebody that's already in your life, influencing an influencer to you that you don't even think of using that word.
I guess I've not thought about that before. I mean, technically I could consider this a mentorship.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to be soaking this up and taking this advice.
You absolutely can.
Well, I mean,
but you better check with your generation if that word can be appropriately used.
Mentor. We might need to come up with something different, like a new term.
Right.
I appreciate the time. Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see you next time.